Okay, hello Internet. My name is Alex and I'm just going to show you through a kind of tutorial of how to use TidalCycles, which is, if you don't know, a sort of environment for exploring pattern, generally musical pattern with text. So what I'm going to be doing is going through this file here. To follow along, you'll have to install Tidal yourself first. So if I bring up a web browser, I can show you how to do that. You should be able to follow along, but what you'll also need is this workshop.tidal file. So So yeah, so Tidal can play samples. That's not so exciting. Slightly more exciting, we can play a sequence of samples. So just by putting a space and then another folder name that we just saw, we can just string them together into a loop. Shorthand for silencing whatever's playing is just to type hash and evaluate that. So when we play that and compare it to this, we'll see that the more samples we add, the faster it goes. Or it seems to, at least. What's really happening is that what you're describing here is a cycle, and a cycle always has the same duration, which is locked to whatever the current beats, cycles per minute is, or cycles per second. And so the more that you put in here, the more it kind of squashes them in to fit that cycle length. And so on. So that's quite different already to a lot of music technology. Instead of having the sort of step or beat being fixed, here it's whatever, it just subdivides the cycle to however many things you give it. So it doesn't really have the same idea of beats per minute. It's more about how fast the cycles go. So inside this, these double quotes, you're describing a sequence. A lot of stuff happens outside that sequence, which we'll look at a bit later. But let's carry on and see. You can actually do quite a lot inside this sequence. Sort of, it's like a mini language inside Tidal, just for describing sequences. And there's a lot you can do inside here. For example, if you sort of wrap, well, let's gradually break it down. So if we start with a simple sequence like that, we can take one of those steps inside it and put two things there. So 1 sec, I might just turn down the volume on the So yeah, and so inside that step we kind of broke it down. So here we have one step, a second step, a third step, a fourth step. This second step is broken down into two sub-steps. And again, the more things we put in there, the more it just squashes them in to fit the space available. So yeah. So that's a way of kind of getting away from the sort of rigidity of sequences by kind of breaking them down into things of an unequal length. So let's try putting 3 things in there and 3 things in there. I should one fiddly thing is how you kind of put these lines next to each other, or well, how you run these patterns when there's lots of lines together. So here we've got two patterns, one that starts with D1. Remember, that's a connection to the synth. And then we've got D2, which is another connection to the synth. And they can both run at the same time. So let's run this with Control Enter. And this one as well. Hush stops them both. Now I'm using Control Enter here, but if I had them right next to each other like this, it wouldn't work. And that's because it's trying to run two patterns as one. And the way around this is, instead of using Control and Enter, use Shift and Enter like this. Shift and Enter just runs one line. You can kind of see it flash, the line that it's running. Whereas Control Enter runs more than one line. These patterns are just on one line, so there's no real difference. You may as well just use Shift Enter for now. And by the way, I've broken down this pattern, so one of the steps has two sub-steps, and you can carry on. So I can break down this one into another one with two sub-steps like this. You might want to pause the video at some point and play around with this yourself. So you can silence one of these patterns, by the way, with that silence technique. So then D1 silence, and now only D2 is playing. Right. Oh, I've got a lot of this to go. I might have to do this in several goes. I'm getting quite tired already. But hey, let's carry on for now. Add a silence rest with yes. So if you want to add bits of silence or rests in a rhythm, then you can do that with this tilde character. So let's listen to this. I can replace some with tildes. Yeah. So up to now we've just been sending sound parameters to tell Tidal what sound to play, but well, dirt super glider what to play. So but it can do more than that. You can apply lots of other effects and pattern those as well. So let's start with this one. So it's this handy little operator, this hash here, or £, if you're American, sort of combines different parameters together. With a Control Enter, you can put these neatly on separate lines and evaluate them together as one pattern. So what's going on here is A is getting lined up with this clap here, O with this one here, E with this one here, and I with this one here. But these aren't the names of sounds, these are the names of vowels. So you can kind of hear it sound as if it was being vocalized using a kind of ah sound. It only works with vowels, but yeah. I haven't told you how to do that yet. Yeah, that's better. So you get the the idea. Oh, lost myself. Yeah. So this is a way of patterning both sound and the effects on that sound. There's a lot of other effects you can apply. One nice one is just gain, which changes the volume of the sound. This is quite nice for doing simple sort of emphasis patterns like this. In this example, it's using this multiply operator. What this is really saying is play BD 32 times. And then it's applying a sine wave to the gain. So instead of making a sequence like this, which sounds quite interesting actually, instead of doing that, it's following a sine curve to gently go up and down. So, yeah. So that's a kind of continuous pattern being applied here. Another simple one is speed. So if I take this pattern and apply speed to it, maybe the default is 1, 2 would be twice as fast, and if you play a sample twice as fast, it goes up an octave. So if I went 0.5, it would go down an octave. An alternative to using speed is instead using up, which adjusts the speed using musical note values, so semitones. That's a bit clearer. So So this is a bit annoying. I've got 4 of these JV bass notes, and I've got 5 values here for but you can only hear 4 of them because the thing on the left, if we talk about it being on the left, really it's above in this case, but the thing that comes first sort of defines the structure of a pattern. So if I'm trying to apply up here, it's ignoring this because it doesn't match with any of the samples here. If anything isn't very clear, you could leave a note in the comment section below this video, or just ask on the TopLap Slack channel, the Tidal one on the TopLap Slack. So here we go. What we can do then is actually put up first, and then we can just say we don't have to specify 4 of these because the structure isn't coming from here, it's coming from over here. And now we can hear this note. Yeah. So, yeah. Some other examples.
3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Thank you. And there's a lot more of these. So pan is quite fun. So here you can actually apply more than one of these to a pan. So if you're wearing headphones or you have stereo speakers, you should be able to hear that going from left to right, and then back again, following a sine wave again. Again, this could... So 0 is left, 1 is right, and 0.5 is in the middle. So yeah, shape is a good one. This is going to be loud. I'm going to reduce that a bit. Maybe with a kick. Instant gabber. So yes, shape is distortion, wave shaping, distortion. It goes from 0 to 1, I think. So yeah, there's quite a lot of these. So let's see what else there is. This is reverb. So this is quite a small part of Tidal, but already you can play around with making some sequences and applying patterns of effects to them. And yeah, already have quite a lot of fun. But yeah, there's other things you can try. If you go to the TidalCycles website, you can look at see what other effects there are. I won't go through them all. Cut-off and resonance is fun. Also delays, especially with low values of delay time, so you get nice comb filter effect. But let's move on to what happens with if you put a comma inside one of these sub-patterns. Yes, the answer is polyrhythm. So if you have, let's do it like this now. Right. So, yeah, I'll try and do it like this. So, one thing you can do, usually when you select a sample, you do it like this.
B, A, D, 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 A.
But what you can do is use another parameter to select the sample like this.
A, C, D, E, E.
So if you put this to the left of the sound, then that defines the structure, and we can actually do this sort of thing.
A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, C, A, B, C.
Great. So let me just reduce the gain a bit, hit my ears a bit.
C, A, B, C, A, B, C.
So yeah, polyrhythm. You can do this by this sort of thing.
F, B, C, 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 F, B.
So here what's really going on is that I've got two sub-patterns happening at the same time. 0, 1, 2, which is actually giving us the sample of someone saying A, B, C. And then 5, 3, which is actually someone saying F, D. And again, it squashes it to fit a cycle, so that both fit within one cycle, and you get that sort of polyrhythmic effect.
A B D C A B D C A B D C A B D C A B D C A B D C A B D C A B D C A B.
You can also try it with samples of someone speaking numbers.
0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0.
So that's fun. Another way of doing this is with curly brackets.
2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1 2 0 1
C A B C A B C.
That's just really confusing. Let me try something else. So let me put two sort of RP sounds against some percussive sounds. So in this case you can hear, hopefully, that actually this is squashed to fit a cycle, but actually these are matched up step by step, so that BD plays against RP, SN plays against RP2, but then SN2 plays against RP, and then the next time around BD matches up with RP2. So you have these kind of overlaying polyrhythms. So, and you can break them down as well. If you're unfamiliar with polyrhythm, you should be able to get a feel for what's going on here just by playing around with it, but you can also look up on the internet some examples, I expect. So there's actually 3 different patterns running against each other here, because 3 sub patterns broken up with 2 commas. So what is a pattern? Maybe it'd be nice to talk about this for a bit. So I guess a sequence is a pattern, so just something that repeats. These 2 examples sound exactly the same because they are the same. Run for is a function which generates a sequence from 0 up to the number you give minus 1, in this case 3. So yeah, it's just a quick way to quickly get a sequence like this. So yeah, patterns in one way are things which repeat. That's a little bit trivial though, I suppose. Patterns can be much more complex than just the same thing repeating over and over again. For example, you might have reflection in a pattern, symmetry. Again, in Tidal, you've got something which can do this for you. So there's a function called palindrome, which basically takes the sequence you give it, plays it forwards and then backwards as a kind of quite cheap way of making a palindrome. So the same. Here it's slowed down the pattern by 2. Because that's what palindrome is doing. It's sort of doubling up the pattern by having it going forwards and then backwards, and then slowing it down so that each part has the same duration as it would normally. Without that slow 2, it would sound like this. And so on. There are a lot more of these sort of pattern transformation functions, which we'll look at a little later on. Self-similarity. So this is a pattern which is self-similar in that you can hear the same structure on different scales as it plays the sequence, then again twice as fast, and again twice as fast as that, and again twice as fast as that. Get this. So self-similarity is, it when we say something's a fractal, that's what we mean, is that it has self-similarity. The more you zoom in, the more you see similar things to what you saw at wider scales. So again, here's another version, and they sound identical. So here there's a function called slow spread, which is applying these numbers to this function, which controls how dense the pattern is. So it's just stepping through these values, gradually increasing the density, and it then repeats again. So it's basically doing the same as what we've typed out here, but with a few less characters, and in a way which makes it easier to change. Interference. Interference patterns are interesting. So this is where you have two sequences or whatever, two things which are quite usually, can be quite simple. But if you have them interfering in some way, then you get an interesting complex pattern arising out of that interference. One example is just a polyrhythm that we heard earlier. So two very simple patterns played over the top of each other, but with one faster than the other to make a polyrhythm, and you get a longer pattern emerging. Another example is a canon. So we do this with so let's start with this RP sound, which is being turned into a simple scale. And then this weave function allows us to slow that down by 16 in this case, and then apply an effect to it to pick sounds out of that. So you can hear it's gradually going up that scale that we defined, but following this vowel pattern. But if we add another here, what weave does is have it picking sounds from a different part of the scale. And we can add more of these. Maybe use a speed pattern here. And then to add another interference, we could reverse it. But if we use jux with that, it does that reversal, but only in one speaker. yeah, another interference on top of the interferences. I just took a pattern, reversed it, and then put it on top of it, but in separate speakers, so you can hear the two speakers interacting with each other. So that's another kind of pattern, a interference pattern. Yeah, and I guess that's the basis of what Tidal does. But there's a lot more of these functions, and the nice thing is, even though each one's quite simple, because in Tidal everything is a pattern really, you can take the output of one function and feed it into the other, so that you get this composition which becomes very complex out of very simple parts. So I'm getting there. Let's see, transforming sequences. We've already seen slow, so slowing things down or speeding things up with density. They're very similar really, and in fact if you slow but with 0.5, that of course is the same as doing density of 2. And reverse we've already seen. Oh, I should mention that you can also change the speed of this. I should mention that because this is sort of handmade software, there's no sort of limits built in, so you can increase this to a ridiculous number if you want. Ooh. Yeah. So we've looked at density. It is a fun one, so I think I'll change this so you can hear. Let's try with alphabet. I don't know why I didn't copy and paste that or something. So
C A C A C A C A C A C A C A C A C A C A C A B C A B C A B C A B C A B C A B C A.
the timing's a bit off with these samples, but you get the idea. And if we do it a 4.
A C A B D A B C A B C B C A C A B A B C A B.
So it's quite hard to hear exactly what's going on, but I'll try and explain it. So it's saying A B C D, and what it does is shift the pattern by a certain amount each repetition. So if you say it a 4, it'll shift by a quarter of a step each repetition. So the second time round,
A B C A B C D B C D A C D A B D A B C A B C D B C D A C D A.
I think what it's doing is shifting it this way. I could be wrong. So I think it's probably shifting it that way and then doing the same again. So now I'm getting confused. It's actually quite late. So doing this and then shifting again to do this. So you end up going A, B, C, D, then the next time around going D, A, B, C, and then C, D, A, B, and then B, C, D, A until you get back to the start again.
A B C A B C D B C D A C D A B D A B C A B C D B C D A C D A B D A B C A B C D B.
Yeah, so if we did that using the shorthand we saw earlier, so and slowed it down a bit.
2
We could maybe write that down and try and work out exactly what's going on.
3.
Again, we can do this so that it happens only in one speaker.
0 1 0 1 0 1 2 0
which is even more confusing.
3 1 1 2 0 0 1 0 1 0.
But really, you don't have to understand what's going on. You can just explore these patterns until it sounds good. That's the important thing. So we've seen Jux, which takes a function and just applies it in one speaker. Every is similar, except it takes a function and applies it every n number of cycles. So here, every 4 cycles, it will make this pattern twice as dense. Let's increase that. So this every 4 density 8 thing returns another function, another pattern rather, which you can then transform again. So we could do Jux rev, or every 3 slow by 2. And so on. This dollar is a bit confusing. It just pops up in the Tidal syntax. It's always here at the start, and it's often sort of dividing up between different parts of a pattern as it's being transformed. It's the one piece of syntax which takes quite a lot of getting used to. It doesn't actually do anything apart from split up the pattern. So what it's really doing is taking everything on its right, wrapping it up, and giving it to the function on the left. If it wasn't there, then Tidal would get really confused and come up with a nasty error message. That's because it's saying every 3 repetitions, apply this function, and then it's looking for the pattern to apply this function to, and it just finds the word every, which isn't a pattern on its own. So to make it see everything here as a pattern, then as the thing that it's applying this to, then you could wrap it in brackets like this. Or alternatively, you could use this dollar. I like to use the dollar. You might find it easier to wrap things in brackets as it's passed around. Now, particularly if you're new to programming, that isn't going to make a lot of sense, and you're just going to have to try and get a feel for when to use this and when not to. The error messages aren't very clear, unfortunately. But if you really want to get your head around the dollar, then come and ask us. Come and chat on the Top Lap Slack. Another place I should mention where you can find help Now this is extra stuff. If you're feeling brave, you can try and link together more than one transformation inside something that Jux is being applied to. I think we'll leave that for now. Slow spread we saw earlier on. That is for taking, so density, for example. So I'm getting tired. So density we saw makes things more dense or faster. And if we use slow spread, we can wrap that function in brackets and then give a list of values here, separated by commas and wrapped in square brackets. And it'll cycle through these values, so you can hear it's going twice as dense, 3 times as dense than the original amount of denseness or density. And 16 times. Let's put that in. Yeah. Slow cat is a way of sticking 2 patterns together, one after the other. So it's just cycling through these patterns. Or stack is similar, but it plays them both at the same time. And so on. Chop is actually really fun. I won't play this sample because I think it may be a sample which YouTube will recognize and mute or put adverts on this video. So I'll pick another one. How about this? So this is a nice break called arc. But you can hear it's triggering the sample once every cycle, but the sample itself lasts longer than a cycle. So it's playing lots of versions on top of each other and sounds really messy. But if we chop that sample into 128 bits, it's taking that sample, chopping into 128 bits, and then squashing those to fit that cycle. So it seems to loop inside the length of the cycle very nicely, and we can play other stuff on top. And it fits. And if we change the BPM, or as it's called, the cycles per second, you'll hear that changes the duration of the loop. There we go. If we wanted to make this sort of fit something other than one cycle, say 2 cycles, then do loop at 2 for 2 cycles. Then we can reduce the number of bits. And then it's fitting the loop perfectly. But what we end up is with a sample, a loop, a pattern rather, a pattern that has 32 bits for sampling. So what happens if we then reverse that? Let's see. amplify just in one speaker. Yeah. So it's taking that pattern of bits for sample and reversing them, so it's playing those cut up bits in reverse order. Sounds pretty fun. We can also apply well, maybe not speed, because Loopat is already manipulating speed. Let's I don't know, let's add some wave shaping but following a sine wave, maybe scaling that a bit. So that wave shaping is being applied to all the different bits of sample with following a sine wave, if that makes sense. I'm probably making less sense as I go on, but sorry about that. It's because I'm getting tired. I should have poured myself a glass of water before I started this, really. Right, so I think that will probably do for now. If you carry on, you'll see a subtle difference between the chop and striate functions, and also get on to exploring some random numbers. But I think I'm not making enough sense to make this worthwhile carrying on.